Under the fractured light of a winter moon, a mute shadow learned that silence could scream louder than steel. Rowan Hale moved like mist through the grand hall of Eldridge Keep, her bare feet whispering against the flagstones, chilled by the mountain winds seeping through arrow-slit windows. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine smoke and spiced mead, but beneath it lurked the sharper tang of ambition, wolves in finery, their eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. She was no guest here, no honored omega of any pack. Exile had carved her into this, a ghost serving at the edges of power, her voice stolen long ago by the beta who had claimed her as mate, only to discard her like frost-bitten fruit when her heat brought no heirs, no strength to boast of. Mute, they called her cursed, a vessel cracked by the goddess's whim. Banished from her birth pack's hearths, she wandered the borders of the northern realms, trading silence for scraps of shelter. Tonight, the keep thrummed with the weight of diplomacy. Alpha King Cale Varro held court at the high table, his broad frame draped in a cloak of raven fur, edged with silver thread that caught the torchlight like veins of ice. His face, etched with lines deeper than the scars hidden beneath his tunic, spoke of burdens no crown could lighten. Whispers among the servants painted him as a king haunted, guilt from the purge of his own kin years past, when betrayal had forced his hand in blood to secure the throne. Ethical to a fault, they said, melancholic as the long northern nights, he ruled with a mercy that chafed against the feral instincts of his court. Omegas like Rowan avoided his gaze. Alphas like him saw through silences, unraveling them like frayed knots. She carried a silver tray laden with goblets, her slender hands steady despite the tremor of cold that never quite left her bones. Around her left wrist coiled the story's quiet sentinel, a thin bracelet of blackened iron forged from the chains of her old pack's forge. It was no ornament, but a mark of her rejection, a circlet etched with thorns, given by the beta who had silenced her with a blow to the throat during their failed bonding rite. The metal bit into her skin when she tensed, a constant reminder that words were luxuries for the unbroken. Tonight, it felt heavier, as if the moon outside pulled at it like a tide, urging secrets to the surface. The hall's vastness swallowed sounds. The low rumble of voices negotiating alliances against the encroaching rival packs from the eastern wilds, the crackle of hearth fires roaring against the encroaching gale. Snow lashed the leaded panes, blurring the world beyond into a white void where wolves howled their ancient grievances. Rowan paused near a pillar wreathed in evergreen boughs, her gray eyes, storm cloud soft, flicking to the king. He leaned forward, his voice a gravelly timbre cutting through the din, discussing borders and blood oaths with envoys from the Frostfang clans. His scent reached her then, unbidden, cedar and storm, laced with the faint, metallic undercurrent of old wounds. It stirred something primal in her chest, a flutter she dismissed as fear. Omegas did not dream of kings. They endured them. A shadow detached from the throng near the king's flank, a figure cloaked in the muted grays of a lesser noble, his movements too fluid, too deliberate. Rowan's breath caught, the iron bracelet warming against her pulse as if sensing the shift in the air. Poison. She smelled it now, faint as nightshade beneath the mead's sweetness, carried on the wind from the assassin's sleeve. The hall's chatter dulled to a haze. She saw the glint of steel as the traitor lunged, dagger arcing toward Cale's exposed throat, time fractured like ice under a paw. Gasps rippled outward, but the assembly froze, alphas bound by protocol, betas by hesitation, the king's guards a beat too slow in the labyrinth of bodies. Rowan did not think. Her tray clattered to the stone, goblets shattering like brittle bones, and she surged forward. The blade met her bare palms, not her body shielding his, but her hands closing around the poisoned edge. Agony bloomed instant and searing, the venom-laced steel slicing flesh as if her skin were parchment. Blood welled hot, crimson against the white of her servant's shift, dripping to mingle with the spilled wine on the floor. She held it, wrists locked, the iron bracelet now slick and burning where it kissed the wound. The assassin's eyes widened in shock, his grip faltering as her silent will bore into him, a force unspoken, unyielding. Cale twisted in his seat, his hand snapping to her arm, steadying her as the traitor staggered back, yanked away by belated guards. The hall erupted. Shouts, the clash of drawn swords, the king's roar commanding order amid chaos. But in that suspended breath, as pain clawed up her arms like winter roots seeking earth, something deeper unfurled. Cale's gaze locked on hers, his blue eyes, fractured as glacial crevasses, widening not in pity, but recognition. A voice echoed, not from her lips, but threading into his mind like moonlight through fog. Live, King of Shadows. The blade finds no throne tonight. It was her, raw, resonant, a whisper forged in the forge of her silenced soul. The fated bond snapped taut between them, invisible chains pulling at the iron on her wrist, drawing blood and destiny into one. He recoiled inwardly, guilt's old specter rising like smoke. For what king deserved such a savior? Rowan swayed, the poison's fire spreading, her world narrowing to the warmth of his grip and the moon's indifferent watch from above. In the hush that followed the traitor's drag to the dungeons, the hall's fires flickered low, casting long shadows that danced like unspoken accusations. What mercy could bloom from a wound like this? What strength, if not in choosing to shield the guilty? The night deepened, winds howling promises of trials yet to come, as the mute Omega's blood stained the stones, a first mark in the snow of their unraveling fates. The poison coursed through Rowan's veins like liquid frost, threading fire along her nerves as guards hauled the traitor away, his curses dissolving into the hall's clamor. She crumpled to her knees amid the shattered goblets, the iron bracelet on her wrist now a searing brand, its thorns etched deeper by the blade's venom. Blood pooled beneath her palms, dark and viscous, staining the flagstones in patterns that evoked ancient runes, symbols of a goddess who favored the silent with trials unspoken. Cale's hand lingered on her arm, his touch a anchor against the vertigo claiming her, but she recoiled instinctively, the bond's echo still reverberating in her mind like a distant howl. Not yours to save, she thought, the words forming shadows in her throat, unvoiced yet heavy as the winter gale battering the keep's walls. He pulled her to her feet with a gentleness that belied his king's stature, his blue eyes searching hers amid the uproar. The assembly surged forward, envoys murmuring of plots, betas scrambling to mop the spill, alphas baring teeth in belated fury, but Kyle's command cut through like a blade through fog. Clear the hall, healers to the antechamber now. His voice, roughened by years of decrees born from regret, carried the weight of one who knew betrayal's bite too well. The purge of his own bloodline haunted him still, a specter of choices made in the name of duty, leaving him adrift in a throne room of ghosts. To accept salvation from an Omega like her, a mute wanderer, marked by rejection, stirred the guilt deeper, a wound he rationalized as deserved isolation. Rowan staggered as he guided her through a side archway, the corridor beyond swallowing them in chill shadow. Snow drifted through a cracked casement, dusting her bloodied hands with white, turning crimson to roseate ice. The air smelled of damp stone and pine resin from the torches guttering in iron sconces, their flames leaping like wary spirits. Her body betrayed her, the poison sapping strength from limbs already honed lean by exile's hardships. She had been cast out thrice, first by her birth pack for her muteness, deemed an ill omen, then by the beta mate who silenced her protests with fists, discarding her when no pups quickened in her womb. Finally, by the border clans who saw her as a harbinger of misfortune. Survival had taught her to fade, to serve without claim, but tonight her silence had shattered. bridging to him in a way that terrified her more than the venom. Kale's scent enveloped her as they reached the antechamber, a small vaulted room lit by a single hearth where embers glowed like dying stars. Cedar and storm now mingled with the sharp bite of his alarm. It pulled at her core, instinctive as the moon's tide on blood. He eased her onto a fur-draped bench, his large hands careful as he unwrapped the iron bracelet, peeling it from her swollen wrist. The metal clattered to the floor, leaving welts that mirrored the thorn's bite, and she winced, the absence of its weight feeling like a shed skin. "Why?" he murmured, not to her, but to the shadows, his brow furrowed in the firelight's unforgiving glow. Guilt etched his features, for he had seen her before, fleeting glimpses in the keep's underbelly, a silent servant whose gray eyes held storms he dared not weather. To owe his life to one so broken stirred a curiosity laced with fear. What curse had the goddess woven here, binding a king's fate to an Omega's mute defiance? A healer bustled in, an elder beta with poultices of willow bark and moonwort, her hands swift as she cleansed the wounds. The poison's burn ebbed under the herb's cool mercy, but Rowan's mind raced, the bond's whisper lingering like an uninvited guest. She could feel him now, fragments of his turmoil seeping through, the weight of a crown forged in fratricide, the melancholy of nights spent staring at frost-laced maps, plotting against rivals who scented his hesitation like weakness. He paced the room's edge, his cloak swirling like raven wings, boots crunching on scattered snow from the corridor. Outside, wind howled through the mountain passes, carrying weavos from the wild packs, a chorus that spoke of encroaching war. The diplomatic gathering had fractured, whispers of the traitors' clan, eastern spies. Perhaps would ignite old feuds, drawing Kale back into the fray he loathed. She met his gaze as the healer bound her palms in linen, the fabric stark white against her skin. Fear coiled in her chest, not of him, but of the pull, the way his presence ignited a warmth she had long denied herself. Omegas like her did not bind to kings, they endured, they faded. Yet curiosity flickered, born from the shared silence of their wounds, his voiced in decrees and solitude, hers in the iron's unyielding grip. He knelt before her, close enough that his breath stirred the loose strands of her hair, scented faintly of lavender from the keep's scant gardens. "You spoke," he said softly, the words a bridge over the abyss between them. Not aloud, but in his mind, she felt the echo, her own voice threading back. "I shielded what the moon deemed worth saving." He flinched, the bond denying his rational walls, stirring a denial rooted in duty. A king could not afford such vulnerability, not when betrayal lurked in every shadow. The hearth's fire crackled, casting their silhouettes long and entwined on the stone walls, blood's faint metallic tang mingling with the herb's earthiness. Rowan's heart pounded, a rhythm syncing with the distant howls, as if the night itself urged them toward an unraveling. What strength lay in this instinctive tether, if not the mercy of curiosity amid fear? Kale rose, turning to the window where snow veiled the world in white oblivion, his back a bastion of resolve cracking under the weight. The bond hummed, unbidden, a promise of trials where exile met throne and silence found its roar. "And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you." The antechamber's embers had died to a sullen glow when the first alarm shattered the fragile peace. A distant clamor of boots on stone, shouts echoing through the corridors like the prelude to a hunt. Rowan's bandaged hands throbbed in rhythm with her pulse, the linen wrapping stiff with drying blood. But the poison's grip had loosened under the healer's arts, leaving her body heavy yet alert. She rose from the bench, the fur pelt slipping to the floor in a whisper of shed warmth, her gray eyes narrowing toward the arched doorway. Kyle stood silhouetted against the hearth, his broad shoulders tense beneath the raven cloak, the silver threads catching flickers of dying light like veins of frost. The bond hummed between them, a taut silver thread pulling at her core, instinctive and unwelcome, stirring curiosity amid the fear that had long been her companion. He turned to her, his fractured blue gaze holding a storm's depth. "They come for you now," he said, voice low and gravel rough, laced with the melancholy that clung to him like winter's breath. The traitor's kin, eastern shadows, loyal to the rival packs. The hall's chaos was their signal. Guilt shadowed his words, for in saving him, she had painted a target on her own silence, drawing the wolves he had failed to purge from his borders. Rowan felt it through the bond. The weight of his past, the blood of kin spilled in the throne's defense, rationalized as duty, yet festering like an untreated wound. He extended a hand, not commanding but offering, his calloused palm scarred from battles where mercy had cost him dearly. She hesitated, the absence of the iron bracelet a hollow ache on her wrist, its thorny imprints now pale welts that mirrored the scars of her rejections, marks of betas and packs that had deemed her unworthy, her muteness a curse rather than a veil for deeper gifts. The keep trembled with urgency as they slipped into the shadowed passages, Kyle leading her through a labyrinth of service tunnels carved into the mountain's heart. Snow sifted through unseen cracks, dusting their path with crystalline silence, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient pine. Outside, the wind howled through Eldridge's crags, carrying the faint, feral weavos of approaching foes, scouts from the Frostfang fringes perhaps, or worse, the venomous clans who brewed poisons in hidden vales. Rowan's bare feet padded softly on the uneven stone, each step a negotiation with the cold that seeped into her bones, but the bond warmed her from within, a reluctant fire against the chill. She glimpsed fragments of him in her mind's eye, nights alone in the throne room, maps unrolled under moonlight, plotting defenses against betrayals that echoed his own fratricide. Empathy stirred unbidden, softening the edges of her fear, not pity, but recognition of shared exile, his crowned yet solitary, hers nameless and wandering. They emerged into a forgotten alcove high in the keep's western tower, a refuge of sorts. Walls of weathered granite draped in tattered tapestries depicting lunar hunts, a narrow casement framing the endless white expanse of the mountains. Kyle barred the heavy oak door with a rusted beam, his movements precise, born of instincts honed by years of vigilance. The space smelled of dust and old wax from long-extinguished candles, but a small brazier stood ready, its iron cradle etched with faded runes, symbols of the goddess's watchful eye. He kindled it with flint and tinder from his pouch, flames leaping to life with a hungry crackle, casting their faces in golden hollows and deep shadows. Rowan sank onto a pile of musty furs, her wounded hands cradled in her lap, the pain a dull echo now, overshadowed by the bond's insistent pull. She watched him, curiosity blooming like frost flowers on glass. This king, ethical to his ruin, who chose mercy over slaughter yet bore the guilt as a second crown. Footsteps echoed distantly below, muffled by stone but closing, pursuers navigating the keep's underbelly, drawn by the scent of blood and the whisper of scandal. Cale knelt beside her, his presence a bulwark, cedar and storm scent enveloping her like a cloak. "Stay close," he murmured, drawing a dagger from his boot, not poisoned, but keen as winter's edge. Through the bond, she felt his resolve fracture. Duty demanded he fight alone, protect the fragile Omega who had upended his isolation. But the tether denied it, weaving their fates tighter. Rowan reached out, her bandaged fingers brushing his arm. A silent affirmation. No words passed her lips, but her mind echoed to his. "We shield each other, as the moon guards the lost." He stiffened, the intrusion both intrusion and balm, stirring a denial he could no longer voice. What king yielded to an Omega's will? Yet in her gray eyes, storm-soft and unyielding, he saw his own melancholy reflected, a mirror to the choices that had broken them both. The door shuddered under a heavy blow, splintering wood releasing the acrid tang of torch smoke and feral sweat. Shadows spilled in as the beam cracked, 3 figures lunging through, betas from the eastern clans, their eyes wild with the traitor's vengeance, blades glinting in the brazier's light. Kale surged forward, his roar a thunder that shook the tapestries. Dagger clashing against steel in a visceral dance. Blood sprayed, hot, metallic, splattering the furs as he felled the first. His movements a blur of controlled fury, guilt fueling precision rather than rage. Rowan scrambled back, heart pounding like war drums, but instinct propelled her. She seized a loose stone from the floor, its weight solid in her grip, and hurled it at the second assailant, cracking his skull with a sickening thud. The third turned on her, blade arcing, but Kale was there, tackling him to the ground, the struggle a tangle of limbs and grunts, ending with a snap of bone and a final, gurgling breath. Panting, he rose, blood streaking his tunic like war paint, his eyes finding hers across the dim refuge. The bond thrummed deeper now, empathy forging into something unbreakable. A link born not of desire, but of shared defiance against the night. Rowan approached, her hand pressing to his chest, feeling the rapid beat beneath, syncing with her own. Through the connection, she sensed his turmoil, the rational walls crumbling, curiosity yielding to acceptance of this mute savior who mirrored his wounds. He covered her hand with his, the touch tender amid the blood's warmth, the brazier's flames leaping as if the goddess herself approved. Outside, the wind wailed, snow veiling their sanctuary in white isolation, but within, a fragile warmth kindled, 2 exiles bound by choice, their silence louder than the howls of war. What was redemption, if not this mercy forged in refuge's fire? The tower groaned under the storm's assault, dilemmas of duty and destiny hanging like unsheathed blades, as the iron's absent bite whispered of bonds that could heal or destroy. The tower's stones seemed to breathe with the storm's fury, each gust rattling the casement like the goddess's impatient fingers on a frozen drum. Rowan huddled against the bloodied furs, her bandaged hands trembling not from cold, but from the echo of violence that lingered in the air, metallic and thick, mingling with the brazier's acrid smoke. Kyle stood over the fallen assailants, his chest heaving, dagger still clenched in a fist slick with crimson. The flames cast his face in stark relief, shadows carving deeper the lines of guilt that had long claimed him. A king whose mercy had spared too many foes, only to invite their blades closer. Through the bond, she felt it all, the rational denial fracturing like thin ice, curiosity yielding to a reluctant awe as he turned to her, blue eyes fractured by the fire's glow. She had not meant to reveal more than the shield of her body, but the refuge's desperation had cracked something deeper within. As the last intruder's breath rattled out, a warmth uncoiled in her core, unbidden and ancient, threading through the bond like moonlight piercing storm clouds. It was no mere instinct, it was her gift, the hidden vein of power her muteness had veiled, a pathfinder's sight, whispered in old lunar lore as the Omega's quiet oracle, able to glimpse threads of fate woven by the deity's hand. Exile had buried it, rejection stamping it dormant like embers under snow. But here, in this blood-warm sanctuary, it stirred. Rowan's gray eyes clouded, vision blurring as fragments of destiny unfurled before her. Visions of shadowed councils in eastern vales, where rival alphas plotted with the traitor's kin, their maps etched in venomous ink. Glimpses of Kale's throne crumbling under waves of betrayal, not from without, but from the fractures of his own merciful heart. He knelt beside her, the fur of his cloak brushing her arm, his scent, cedar laced with fresh blood, a anchor pulling her back. "What is it?" he murmured, voice a low rumble that vibrated through the bond, stirring her own unspoken fears. She could not speak it aloud. The curse of her throat a barrier forged in old violence, but the gift bypassed it, flooding his mind with images sharp as shattered glass. He saw himself first, a younger Kale, crown fresh and heavy, standing over the bodies of his traitorous siblings in the great hall's bloodied light, his decree of mercy sparing the lesser conspirators. A choice that sowed seeds of this night's peril. Then, the paths diverged, one where he faced the eastern horde alone, his forces splintered by doubt, the throne lost to a rival's claw. Another, faint and shimmering, where a silent figure stood at his side, her presence unraveling the plots like frost under dawn, guiding him to alliances forged in unexpected compassion. Kyle recoiled, hand pressing to his temple as if to stem the tide, but the visions held, insistent as the wind's howl outside. Guilt surged through him, hot and familiar. For what king relied on an Omega's sight? He had rationalized his isolation as duty, a penance for the blood on his hands, denying any bond that might soften his resolve. Yet here she was, the mute wanderer whose gray eyes now burned with lunar fire, revealing him as the key to her own unmaking, or remaking. Rowan felt his turmoil echo back, the melancholy of a ruler who chose ethics over empire, now confronted with destiny's cruel mirror. Her gift manifested not as glory, but as burden, a revelation that she was no mere survivor, but the pathfinder born to heal the wounds of fallen kings, her silence the vessel for truths too sharp for words. The brazier spat embers, one landing on the discarded iron bracelet nearby, its thorny etchings glowing faintly red, as if the symbol itself awakened to the moment. Rowan reached for it instinctively, fingers closing around the cool metal despite the ache in her palms. The vision sharpened then, pulling from her a deeper layer, flashes of her own past, the beta-mate's fist silencing her cries during the bonding rite, the pack's exile under a mocking moon, each rejection a forge tempering this power. And woven through it, the bond's truth, she was his key, the Omega whose gift could redeem his guilt, turning fratricide's shadow into a legacy of chosen mercy. But acceptance demanded risk. To embrace it meant stepping from exile's veil into the fray, her muteness no longer curse but conduit. Kale's hand covered hers on the bracelet, the touch sending sparks through the bond, warmth against the storm's encroaching chill. "You see it all," he whispered, not in accusation but wonder, his voice cracking the walls of denial. Through the connection, she replied, "I see the paths. King of fractured ice, yours winds through blood and choice, mercy's crown or war's grave. I am the thread that binds them." He searched her face, the firelight dancing in his eyes like distant stars, recognition dawning slow and profound. This was no fated whim. She was the revelation the goddess had hidden in silence, the pathfinder to guide him from guilt's labyrinth. Eastern winds carried the scent of greater threats, rival packs massing in the snow-veiled passes, their alphas hungry for his weakened throne. But with her sight, he glimpsed countermeasures, hidden passes unbarred by her visions, traitors exposed before their blades drew. Yet doubt lingered, a thorn as sharp as the bracelets. Rowan pulled away slightly, the weight of her gift crashing down, visions of her own potential fall, bound to a king whose wars might claim her as surely as exile had. The bond resisted the distance, pulling them closer, empathy forging the link into something visceral, undeniable. Outside, Weavos rose in chorus, the moon's pale disk breaking through clouds to silver the snow, bathing the tower in ethereal light. Kyle rose, drawing her with him to the casement, where the world stretched in frozen vastness. "If this is destiny," he said, his breath fogging the glass, "then we walk it together. Your silence, it speaks what my crown cannot." The words hung, a bridge over the abyss, as the gift settled between them like a shared heartbeat. In that moment, under the lunar gaze, Rowan felt the Rinascimento stir, not yet full, but nascent, her hidden power the key unlocking his chains of guilt. The iron bracelet dangled from her fingers, its thorns a reminder. Strength lay not in thrones or voices, but in the mercy of revelations that bound the broken. The storm raged on, but within the refuge, fate's threads wove tighter, promising confrontations where past and power would clash like blades on ice. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The tower's fragile sanctuary shattered under the onslaught of dawn's pale light, filtering through the casement like a reluctant witness to judgments long deferred. Rowan stood at the window's edge, the iron bracelet clutched in her bandaged palm, its thorny weight a talisman against the visions that still swirled in her mind. Ethereal threads of fate, now tangled with the scent of impending blood. The storm had ebbed to a mournful whisper, leaving the mountains cloaked in crystalline hush. But the air hummed with unrest. Distant weavos rising from the valley below, a chorus of packs converging on Eldridge Keep like shadows drawn to a wounded flame. Cale's presence beside her was a steady heat, his raven cloak dusted with the night's snow. But through the bond, she felt the fracture widening in him. The guilt of past mercies now demanding reckoning, his ethical core tested by the revelations she had unveiled. He had sent ravens at first light, summoning his inner counsel from the keep's depths, but the eastern winds carried more than snow. They bore the rival Alpha's banner, crimson against the white, signaling not diplomacy, but dominion. Thorn Blackthorn, lord of the venom claws, the very pack that had birthed the traitorous blade, his shadow loomed in her Pathfinder's sight, a hulking figure scarred by old wars, his ambition a venom as potent as the dagger's kiss. Rowan sensed the confrontation brewing, her gift pulsing like a second heartbeat, revealing the threads. Thorn's alliance with remnants of Cale's purged kin, whispers of fratricide twisted into rallying cries against the merciful tyrant. The iron bracelet warmed in her grip, thorns pricking through the linen, a reminder that her own past echoed in this fray, rejections that had forged her silence into strength, now called to judge a king's redemption. They descended the tower stairs as the keep awoke to alarm, boots echoing on spiral stones slick with meltwater, the air thick with the tang of fear sweat and forged steel. Guards flanked them, their armor glinting like frost under torchlight, but Rowan's focus narrowed to Cale's back, the tension in his shoulders a map of dilemmas unspoken. Through the bond, fragments seeped, memories of the purge, his siblings' eyes pleading as blades fell, mercy granted to the lesser guilty only to breed this viper's nest. What is forgiveness? Her mind echoed to him unbidden, if not the chain that binds the hand from vengeance. He faltered mid-step, the words a lunar arrow piercing his rational armor, stirring the melancholy that had isolated him from throne and heart alike. The great hall, once a stage for shattered goblets, now bristled with confrontation. Thorn Blackthorn strode in at the head of his entourage, his frame massive as an ancient oak, eyes black as pitch and gleaming with predatory glee. Flanking him were betas from the traitors' line, their scents laced with nightshade and grudge, and behind them, ghosts of Cale's past, exiled cousins, spared by his decree, now baring teeth in betrayal's grin. The hearth roared, flames leaping high as if feeding on the tension, casting the assembly in reds and golds that evoked blood on snow. Snowflakes eddied through the open portals, carried on a chill wind that howled like the goddess's lament, dusting the flagstones where Rowan's own blood had first marked this fate. Kyle took the high dais, his voice a gravel command, cutting the din. Thorn, your blade sought my throat in my own hall. Speak your grievance, or let steel settle it. But Thorn's laugh boomed, deep and mocking, as he gestured to the shadowed figures. Grievance? Your mercy slew my allies in the purge, king of ghosts, spared us the axe, only to watch us sharpen our own. The mute wench who caught the poison. She's no savior but a sign. The goddess rejects your weak throne. Join us or fall. His gaze slid to Rowan, lingering with a leer that twisted her gut, recognizing her as the exile from border clans his own had shunned. Through the bond, Kale's fury flared, protective and raw, but laced with guilt's poison. These betrayers were his creation, mercy's bitter fruit. Rowan stepped forward, unbidden, her bare feet silent on the cold stone, the iron bracelet dangling like a gauntlet thrown. The hall hushed, eyes widening at the mute Omega daring the fray, her gray gaze, storm-soft yet unyielding, locking on Thorn. Her gift surged then, visions flooding not just Kale, but spilling outward in ethereal wisps, visible to all as faint lunar glows. Paths of war, where Thorn's horde overran the north, rivers running red, Kale's crown shattered. Alternatives, where forgiveness unraveled the plots, alliances born from shared scars rather than spilled blood. The betas murmured, unease rippling like wind through pines, as Thorn snarled, lunging with claws extended, not at Kyle, but her, sensing the threat in her silence. Kyle intercepted, his body a shield, the clash visceral, claws raking his arm, drawing blood that sprayed hot and metallic, staining his tunic like accusations renewed. Rowan cried out inwardly, the bond amplifying the pain as her own, her hands flying to the wound, pressing the iron bracelet against it. The thorns bit into his flesh, but with the touch, her Pathfinder's power channeled, a revelation of Thorn's core. Not unyielding evil, but a rival forged in the same fires of rejection, his pack decimated by Kale's earlier wars, mercy denied then, but offered now as a hollow jest. Choose. Her mind thrummed to Kale, the words a philosophical blade. War claims your freedom, but chains the soul. Love, true redemption, demands pardon, even for the poisoned hand. The hall erupted, guards clashing with Thorn's men in a whirlwind of steel and snarls, blood slicking the stones under the moon's midday pallor, filtering through high windows. Kale grappled Thorn to the ground, dagger at his throat, the rival's black eyes defiant yet flickering with the vision's truth. Guilt warred in Kale's fractured gaze, the weight of fratricide pressing. Strike now, end the cycle in vengeance, secure his throne through the freedom of solitary rule, or sheath the blade, offer alliance through forgiveness, binding his fate to hers in love's redemptive proof. Rowan knelt beside them, her bandaged hand on his shoulder. The bond a conduit for her unspoken plea, empathy over empire, compassion's crown over war's grave. The wind howled louder, Weavos joining the fray from without, as if the wilds themselves judged. Thorn spat blood, his voice a rasp. Kill me and become the monster your guilt whispers. Kyle hesitated, the dagger trembling, Rowan's touch a tether pulling him from the abyss. In that suspended breath, under the hearth's fire and the moon's distant watch, he chose, lowering the blade, extending a hand not in death, but decree. Join as kin or exile eternal. Mercy ends this, not blood. Thorn recoiled, pride fracturing, but the visions lingered, seeding doubt in his ranks. The betas faltered, sheathing weapons as the rival alpha rose, defeated not by force, but revelation, slinking into the snow-veiled exit with his shadows trailing. The hall fell silent, blood's warmth cooling on the stones, the iron bracelet now warm in Rowan's palm, its thorns dulled as if sated by the moral pivot. Kyle turned to her, his wound staunched by her press, blue eyes holding a newfound clarity amid the melancholy, guilt not erased, but transmuted. The bond's pull no longer resisted, but embraced as destiny's bridge. Yet the choice hung heavy. Love demanded vulnerability, freedom the isolation he knew too well. Outside, the mountains loomed, eternal witnesses to dilemmas where pardon birthed fragile peace, and the mute Omega's silence roared the philosophy of strength. Mercy, not might, forged the true throne. The wind carried away the last echoes of clash, leaving only the heartbeat of what came next. Renascimento or ruin, under the goddess's unblinking eye. The great hall's echoes faded into a hollow hush, the hearth's flames guttering low, as if spent by the weight of choices forged in their heat. Blood congealed on the flagstones in dark, accusing pools, the metallic tang lingering like a ghost's breath amid the scent of charred pine and melting snow drifting through the portals. Rowan knelt amid the aftermath, her bandaged hands pressed to the cold stone, the iron bracelet slipping from her fingers to clatter softly, a sound swallowed by the wind's distant moan. Its thorns, once sharp reminders of rejection's bite, now lay dulled, as if the mercy extended had tempered their edge, mirroring the shift in the man who stood above her. Cale's wound wept crimson through his torn tunic, but he made no move to staunch it, his fractured blue eyes fixed on the retreating shadows of Thorn's pack, vanishing into the white-veiled mountains like specters denied their feast. Through the bond, Rowan's heart ached with the raw pulse of his turmoil, not victory's thrill, but a deeper unraveling, guilt's chains loosening only to reveal the vulnerability beneath. She felt it viscerally, the fratricide's shadow lifting like fog under dawn, yet leaving him exposed, a king stripped of isolation's armor. Her Pathfinder's gift hummed faintly now, visions ebbing to whispers, paths of fragile alliance weaving through the north. Thorn's retreat, a seed of potential kin rather than endless war. But the cost pressed upon her, heavy as the iron's absent weight. In shielding him, she had stepped from exile's veil, her silence no longer a solitary curse, but a bridge demanding union or sacrifice. Omegas like her were born to heal, the old lore whispered, but healing demanded surrender, of self, of freedom, of the walls built against further pain. Kyle turned to her then, his boots scraping the blood-slick floor, and extended a hand scarred by battles and regrets. The touch, when she took it, sent warmth threading through the bond, chasing the chill that had long nested in her bones. He drew her to her feet, close enough that his cedar and storm scent enveloped her, mingling with the faint lavender of her hair and the herbs still clinging to her wrappings. The hall's remnants watched in stunned silence, guards sheathing swords, betas murmuring of omens under the moon's midday pallor, but their eyes were distant, the world narrowing to the space between them. "You gave me this," he murmured. Voice a gravel whisper roughened by the night's toll, his free hand gesturing to the empty threshold where vengeance had faltered. "Mercy, when my hand craved blood. But what have I given you, Rowan? Exile's end, or a throne's cage?" She searched his face, gray eyes storm-soft yet piercing, the bond amplifying the melancholy that clung to him like frost on raven feathers. Fragments of his soul seeped through, nights of solitary decrees, the crown a yoke of ethical isolation, rationalized as penance for the purge's stains. Now, with Thorn's shadow lifted, redemption beckoned, not as reward, but proof, demanding he choose beyond duty. Her muteness barred spoken words, but the gift bridged it, her mind echoing to his. "You offer union, king of unyielding ice." Not chains, but cure, the wounds we share, mended in the fire of what we become. He flinched at the intimacy, denial's last flicker warring with acceptance. For a king to bind with a mute Omega was to court the wild's judgment, yet the bond resisted severance, pulling like lunar tides on blood. They moved from the hall as one, his arm steady around her waist, guiding her through corridors where torchlight danced on armored walls, casting their entwined shadows long and inseparable. Snow lashed the narrow windows, veiling the world in white oblivion, but within a Renascimento stirred, slow, visceral, born of the night's trials. The healer's chambers awaited, a vaulted sanctum scented with moonwort and smoldering sage, its stone altar draped in white linens, stained faintly from past mendings. An elder Omega tended the space, her eyes wise with the goddess's secrets. But she withdrew at Kael's nod, leaving them in the fire's intimate glow. Rowan eased onto the altar, the cool linen a contrast to the heat building in her core, the bond's pull igniting something primal, resisted yet inevitable. Kael knelt before her, unwrapping the bloodied bindings with hands that trembled faintly. Not from weakness, but the weight of revelation. The wounds on her palms lay exposed, pink and raw. The poison's burn faded to scars that mirrored his own on forearm and soul. He traced them gently, his touch a sacrament, drawing a shiver from her that had nothing to do with cold. Through the connection, empathy flowed bidirectional. Her visions of his guilt now laced with his glimpses of her exiles, the beta's fists, the pack's scorn, the iron bracelet's forge as a mark of survival's cost. "I chose mercy for them," he confessed, voice breaking the chamber's hush, "because strength is not in slaughter, but in sparing the hand that strikes. Yet for you, I would sacrifice the throne itself, if it cures this fracture between us." The words hung, philosophical and raw, the fire crackling as if affirming, what was power, if not the freedom to choose compassion over empire? Rowan's hand cupped his cheek, thumb brushing the line of his jaw, the bond surging with the depth of her unspoken vow. Visions clarified in the shared space, a union not of crowns and heats, but souls. Him yielding the isolation of rule, her emerging from silence's shell, together forging a north where redemption healed the fractured packs. But sacrifice loomed, a shadow in the gift's weave. To fully cure his guilt, she must offer her Pathfinder's light unbound, risking the drain that could claim her voice forever, or worse, her life in the wild's greater wars. Fear coiled in her chest, rationalized as self-preservation, yet curiosity and the tether's warmth urged acceptance. The iron bracelet lay on the altar's edge, reclaimed by her free hand, its thorns now a symbol not of rejection, but alliance, pricking her skin lightly, drawing a bead of blood that he leaned to kiss away, the act tender amid the tragedy's echo. Outside, Weavos rose in tentative harmony, the moon's disk cresting the peaks in silver benediction, bathing the chamber in ethereal light that danced on their forms. Kael rose, drawing her into his arms, the embrace a union of equals, king and omega, guilt and gift, intertwining like roots under snow. The bond sealed then, not in passion's rush, but redemptive proof, his melancholy easing as her silence found voice in his heart. Her exiles transmuted into purpose, sacrifice yielded to cure, wounds mending in the slow burn of acceptance, the north's winds carrying whispers of a legacy reborn. Yet the Renascimento was nascent, fragile as first thaw, demanding they face the wilds as one, where destiny's final trial awaited beyond the keep's stones. In the fire's waning light, under the goddess's watchful gaze, Rowan felt the world's vastness shift, love as redemption's flame, illuminating paths once veiled in despair. The iron bracelet warmed against her skin, a talisman of choices embraced, as the storm's last howls faded into the promise of dawn's unyielding light. The healer's chamber held its breath as the moon climbed higher, its silver light spilling through the arched window like spilled mercury, pooling on the stone floor where shadows of their entwined forms stretched long and unyielding. Rowan's body pressed against Kael's, the warmth of his frame a bulwark against the encroaching chill that seeped from the mountain's veins, carrying the faint, salty bite of distant snowfields. The iron bracelet encircled her wrist once more, its thorns now a gentle prick rather than a torment, drawing faint beads of blood that traced rivulets down her skin, symbols of the union forged not in haste, but in the slow thaw of guarded hearts. Through the bond, she felt the rhythm of his pulse syncing with hers, a visceral cadence that drowned the wind's mournful howl outside, where Weavos rose and fell like the goddess's own lament for souls tested in fire. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing the hollows beneath her gray eyes, storm-soft and luminous in the lunar glow. Guilt's specter lingered in his fractured blue gaze, not vanquished, but transfigured, the fratricide's weight yielding to a deeper reckoning. Redemption as the ultimate sacrifice, demanding he surrender the throne's isolating armor for the vulnerability of love. Rowan sensed it all, the melancholy that had cloaked him like eternal winter, rationalized as ethical duty, now cracking under the bond's insistent light. Her Pathfinder's gift pulsed between them, no longer a solitary burden, but a shared oracle, revealing visions of futures intertwined, packs united under a banner of mercy, eastern vales blooming with fragile alliances, the North's blood-soaked borders healed by choices that echoed her own renascimentos from exile's ashes. Yet the gift exacted its toll, a subtle drain threading through her veins like frostbite's creep, whispering of sacrifices yet to come, her silence deepening perhaps, or her life bartered in greater wars to cure his fractured realm. She pulled back slightly, the linen of her shift whispering against his tunic, stained with the hall's blood and his wounds' fresh seep. The air hung heavy with sage's smolder and the metallic tang of their mingled scars, the hearth's embers crackling softly as if urging confession. What is love? Her mind echoed to him, the words resonant and raw, bypassing her muted throat. If not the proof that wounds can birth light? I offer my sight, King of Thorns, but it demands your freedom, yours and mine. He inhaled sharply, the bond amplifying the tremor in his chest, curiosity long yielded to acceptance, now tested by the final precipice. A king could rule alone, his ethical isolation a shield against further betrayals, preserving the freedom to decree mercy without the heart's entanglement. But union called for more. To heal her exile's echoes, he must embrace her fully, binding throne to Pathfinder in a destiny that transcended hierarchies, risking the wild's judgment on a mute Omega elevated to queen. Kael's fingers traced the iron bracelet, the thorns yielding under his touch as if recognizing the shift. Their etchings, warming like embers, stirred to life. Outside, the wind gusted, flinging snow against the casement in crystalline fury, blurring the moon's disk into a halo of ethereal promise. Visions surged anew through the tether, flashes of Blackthorn's retreated shadow turning not to enmity, but reluctant pact. His venom claws weaving into Kael's forces against greater threats from the shadowed south. Glimpses of Rowan at his side in lunar temples, her gift unveiling hidden passes and traitors' lairs, her silence a revered conduit for the goddess's will. But woven through the light were threads of sacrifice, her body weakening under the gift's unrelenting pull, demanding he choose her over empire, or watch the bond fray in isolation's cold grasp. He drew her closer, forehead resting against hers, breath mingling in the charged space between. A tenderness born from tragedy's forge, romantic in its quiet devastation. I have carried guilt as my crown, he whispered, voice gravel-rough and laced with the North's ancient timbre. Forged in blood I could not unshed. Mercy was my chain, duty my exile. But your silence unmasks me, Rowan. To cure this fracture, I sacrifice the solitary throne. Be my equal, my Pathfinder. Let our union redeem what rejection stole from us both. The words hung, philosophical and visceral, the bond igniting with the depth of his yielding. No longer resisted, but accepted as the Renascimento's flame, love as proof rather than prize. Tears welled in her eyes, unbidden, tracing warm paths down cheeks chilled by the room's draft, the salt mingling with the faint blood from the bracelet's kiss. She nodded, the motion subtle yet profound, her hands rising to clasp his, bandaged palms pressing into his scars, a tactile vow sealing the choice. The gift responded, flooding them with a final vision. Under a full moon's blaze, they stood atop Eldridge's highest crag, Packs gathered in solemn circle. The iron bracelet reforged into a shared circlet, thorns blunted to vines, symbolizing healed wounds. War's howls faded to harmonious calls, her muteness no curse but sacred veil, his melancholy transmuted to compassionate rule. Sacrifice yielded to cure, the drain on her essence eased by his steadfast presence. Their freedoms entwined in liberty's truer form, to choose each other amid the wild's eternal trials. The hearth flared suddenly, flames leaping high as if the goddess herself kindled the moment, casting their forms in golden relief against the stone. Kyle's lips met hers then, not in conquest, but communion, the kiss a slow unraveling of barriers, tender, tragic, redemptive. Blood's warmth lingered on their skin, fire's heat chasing the cold, while the moon watched from above, indifferent yet approving, its light weaving through the snow-lashed night. Rowan's heart swelled, the bond a symphony of shared rebirth, from mute exile to destined consort, from guilt-ridden king to healed sovereign. The north's winds softened, Uivos blending into a lullaby of renewal, as dilemmas of power and compassion resolved in this intimate sanctum. Yet Renascimento was no endpoint, but Genesis, their union a fragile flame against encroaching shadows, demanding vigilance in the mountain's unforgiving embrace. The iron bracelet gleamed on her wrist, a talisman of choices embraced, thorns now guardians of the light they had forged. Under the lunar canopy, love proved its essence, redemption's enduring proof, illuminating paths once lost in despair's snow. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.